Ukraine has successfully attacked Russian oil refineries 17 times, while in the Kaluga region they've been searching for Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups for a whole month without success. Russian aircraft are breaking down en masse. In just one night, 3 planes failed to launch their missiles. Putin talks about meeting with Zelensky, while at the same time preparing a new offensive to take control of the entire Donbas. Solovyov lost his temper and lashed out at his own leader over the continuation of the war. And Zakharova came out with yet another absurd claim about black market organ transplants in Ukraine. Hello, my name is Karina Kleshenaya, and right now here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. Let's start with some major news from the front lines of technology and war. Ukrainian drones continue to devastate Russian oil refining facilities. In August alone, Ukraine managed to successfully attack Russian oil refineries 17 times. The results of this work were summed up by the commander of the Drone Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy, better known as Matter. The Afipsky oil refinery, the NPS Unichatrans in Druzhba, and the Syzran oil refinery were each hit twice. In total, 24.2% of Russia's oil refining capacity has been put out of commission.
At the same time,
in Russian social media, oh, the horror, there are reports about something happening in the Kaluga region where 2 Ukrainian roads are being searched for. Allegedly, up to 10 people crossed the border at the end of last month. But they still can't be found. Notices about their search are being actively posted in local social media groups. But there are 0 results. And for dessert, a real mess. Russian aircraft are breaking down en masse. On the night of September 2nd to 3rd, 3 planes at once failed to carry out combat launches, meaning they didn't strike Ukraine. The reason was technical problems. The Tu-160 Ivan Yarygin couldn't launch its missiles due to a malfunction in the launch system. The Tu-160 Alexei Plokov was struck by lightning, the cockpit was damaged, and the plane returned to the airfield. Another aircraft couldn't take off from Engels. The reason is unknown. Strange things are happening over there, aren't they? Russians, maybe you can share with us in the comments. Putin wants to meet with Zelensky, but he doesn't want to leave Moscow.
I absolutely do not want to leave Crimea or Zaporizhzhia at all.
And knowing what she whispered to him in China, but coming out to the press, Putin started making new statements about ending the war. The old man said that if Zelensky is ready to talk, then let him come to Russia himself, because this old moth isn't going anywhere.
Well, in the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place.
And he added that if it's not possible to resolve the issues of war peacefully, then the objectives will have to be achieved by military means. Of course, Ukraine rejected such brazen proposals from the old man. Meanwhile, Trump stated that Zelensky and Putin are not yet ready for negotiations, but said that something will happen soon. That very military path that Putin was talking about. By the way, Zelensky stated that any territorial concessions would only whet the Kremlin's appetite. Moreover, he made it clear that he will not give Donbas to Putin. Quote, "In 4 years he hasn't managed to occupy even 30% of the region, and there will be no gifts." Nevertheless, Russia is preparing a new offensive against Ukraine. Bloomberg reports that at the Security Council meeting in Toulon last week, there was talk of a buildup of Russian troops near Pokrovsk in Donetsk. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also stated on Friday that 100,000 Russian soldiers have already been deployed to the front line outside the city. The Kremlin has been trying to encircle Pokrovsk for over a year. Its capture would open the way for the occupiers to Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. However, Putin's plans involve control over the entire Donetsk region. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War confirm a large-scale redeployment of Putin's army units. The Russians have withdrawn elements of the airborne forces and the Marines. Previously, they were stationed in the Sumy and Kherson regions. Now they have been redeployed to the Donetsk region. This indicates that the occupiers are preparing for an autumn offensive.
The report about the redeployment suggests that the Russian offensive in the fall of 2025 will focus on efforts to capture the rest of the Donetsk region, specifically in the areas of Dobropilya, Pokrovsk, and Kostiantynivka. The redeployment by the Russian command of forces from the northern Sumy region to the Donetsk region indicates that Russia is lowering the priority of its offensive operations in the Sumy region. Russian troops have intensified efforts to bypass Pokrovsk, advance toward Dobropilya, and outflank the defensive belt of Ukraine's Donetsk region from the west. These efforts have resulted in significant human losses, which likely required the Russian military command to redeploy forces to this area. The Russian offensive in the fall of 2024 was also focused on offensive operations in the Pokrovsk direction, demonstrating Russia's slow progress in achieving its objectives on the battlefield at the cost of enormous human and material losses.
Therefore, despite Trump's loud statements about his intentions to stop the war, Putin's actions once again suggest the opposite. Now, unexpectedly, against the backdrop of such military ambitions, Solovyov and his team have come out against the war because it is not profitable. On federal TV channels, they have started talking about how, while Europe is actively rearming itself by using the war in Ukraine, Russia, on the contrary, is losing military resources.
And in Europe, by and large, of course, this war is needed as well. Why should they care?
Yeah.
Why should they care? And they are fighting Russia's eternal enemy, who for 200 years, ever since Peter the Great cut a window to Europe, has always wanted to close it. What do they care about this? They didn't develop it before, but now they've started developing their military industry, meaning it's the locomotive that will drive their economy forward. They say they have money, well, they'll just print it, and everything will be fine for them. So war is not profitable. In general, she says it's not profitable, that it's bad to wage war, to be honest.
I think he'll soon be forced to shut down his show. Let me remind you, just the other day he started protesting. Like, why hasn't the government responded in any way to the strikes on the oil refineries yet? And in general, is anyone even going to do anything about this? Meanwhile, the drunkard Maria Zakharova is spreading yet another anti-Ukrainian fake about black market organ transplants in Ukraine. This oddball claimed in an interview that supposedly since 2022, Ukraine has relaxed its organ transplant laws and compared the situation to the Balkans in the 1990s, when allegedly black market organ transplants spread throughout Europe. And then Zakharova just went completely off the rails. Now Ukraine is supposedly also a donor of soils, where you can export or sow frozen GMO grains. Seriously? How? How can anyone even believe this? I should note that the Kremlin has been spreading such fakes since 2014. But there is no evidence. All these false statements are based solely on manipulation and conspiracy theories. And all of this is because Moscow's goal is to discredit Ukraine. In short, nothing new. Same as always. And against this backdrop, we will tell you about the reality of this war. Russian soldiers raped 2 schoolgirls in the temporarily occupied territory of Zaporizhzhia. And this is just one link in a chain of crimes committed by the occupiers against Ukrainians who have become hostages of the so-called Russian world. Next, about the criminal exploits of Putin's liberators.
Alina and Rita live in the Zaporizhzhia region on territory occupied by the Russian Federation, just 15 kilometers from the front line. Alina is 14 years old, and her mother is raising her along with her older son. The family's income is small, 30,000 rubles. But despite constant shelling and a lack of money, the mother has no plans to move anywhere with her children.
Here they have their own house, their own roof over their heads. Someone has a chicken, someone else has a duck, someone has planted a vegetable garden. In other words, everyone tries to save wherever they can. Alina's mother.
Rita is a year older than Alina. She also has a brother and a sister, and they are raised by their single father. Their mother died a couple of years ago from cancer.
One evening, Alina and Rita were walking around the village when a civilian car with soldiers stopped next to them. 2 men invited the schoolgirls over, offering them drinks. The girls agreed. They were taken to an abandoned plot in the woods. There, in a trailer, one of the soldiers raped Alina. A week later, the teenagers went to these men's house again. They wanted to get revenge. This time, the same soldier who assaulted Alina raped Rita, according to Verstka.
After what happened, it turned out that one of the girls had the rapist's bank card. And the schoolgirls had been communicating with the Russian soldiers even before the incident. Relatives of the girls told Verstka about the rape of the schoolgirls in the village of Lesnoy in the Zaporizhzhia region. A source in the police confirmed that a report was filed regarding this incident. Rita's sister said that the schoolgirls knew the soldiers and had communicated with them before. The men gained the teenagers' trust by lying that they knew Maria, Alina's mother, well.
The girls have no brains. They were told it was better not to talk to them, not to get into cars. In other words, not to get involved in such trouble. You see, these are men, and they can be different. The situation can also be different, but these fools believed them at their word. Lyubov, Rita's sister.
The girls filed a rape report with the police, but they did not receive a medical report since the schoolgirls had been raped more than a week earlier. There were no biological traces. The military police caught 2 suspected rapists. The detainees turned out to be military officers, each with 20 years of service. Sultan Gasanov and Jenibek Zaporizhzhia from the 38th Brigade. Zaporizhzhia is 37 years old. He was born in Kazakhstan and lives in the Amur region. He has a child who is now 14 years old, the same age as the girls who were raped. Gasanov is 39 years old. He is originally from Dagestan. The Russian rapist is very active on social media. On Instagram, he posted photos with his wife, his teenage daughter, and his son. In a phone conversation with journalists, Gasanov confirmed that he had sex with 2 schoolgirls. First twice with Rina, and then once with Rita. And they had known each other for a week and a half before that.
The car is driving, they turn around and laugh. You understand what it means to behave provocatively, that is to draw attention to themselves. It's not just girls walking down the road. They turn around, look, laugh and nudge each other. Kind of playful. The very fact that this was rape can even be refuted by the fact that they came to us repeatedly. Sultan Gasanov, Russian military officer.
The exemplary family man, Gasanov is ready to accept punishment. But at the moment, he remains at large. The second rapist refused to speak with the publication. The story of the rape of Alina and Anita is not an isolated case. Recently, on the occupied territories, cases of sexual violence have become more frequent, affecting both women and teenagers. In almost all cases, the perpetrators are soldiers of the Russian army. The local police usually cover up such cases. In June and July of this year, only in Melitopol and the Melitopol district in the Zaporizhzhia region, a series of attacks on local girls was recorded. According to local residents, at least 4 incidents occurred. 2 girls were brutally beaten and raped, and 2 others went missing.
They say that servicemen from the so-called Dagestanis are involved in the attacks, and people are even afraid to say the names of the missing out loud. Everyone understands that the military is behind this. Which means there will be no investigation. A resident of Melitopol.
A similar situation is happening in the occupied parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. For example, in May in Donetsk, a 17-year-old girl was lured into an apartment under false pretenses. A man who introduced himself as a police officer allegedly took her to process some documents, but instead he raped her. The perpetrator turned out to be a 28-year-old serviceman from the Russian 110th Motorized Rifle Brigade. He committed the crime on his own birthday. Sexual violence in the occupied territories of Ukraine is not an isolated incident, but a systemic problem. The Wild West, that's what Ukrainian territories occupied for the 3rd year by Russian soldiers are being called. Almost always, the occupiers' rapes go unpunished because there is simply no law in the occupied lands of Ukraine.
I see in the comments that we have a lot of viewers from Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, the USA, and Europe. We are very grateful to you for your support. Let us know which country you're watching us from. And do you believe that in this war, good will triumph over evil? I'll be happy to read and like your comments this evening. Meanwhile, we continue. The most interesting part is coming up. And here's another sensation from the Russian world. Putin's father allegedly dreamed of seizing Ukrainian Crimea, and his son fulfilled that dream. In the book by Russian investigative journalists Roman Badanin and Mikhail Rubin, The Tsar in Person, the secret of the occupation of our peninsula is revealed. The investigators mention little-known episodes from the life of the Bunker family. Supposedly, in the distant summer of 1999, the then little-known future dictator visited his ailing father in a tuberculosis clinic. And I repeat, allegedly, according to eyewitnesses, the dying Vladimir Spiridonovich voiced his last wish. He supposedly said, "I want Crimea to be under Russian control. It should be noted that journalists admit this. This story might just be a legend, but there is definitely symbolism here. Putin's father really did serve in the Black Sea Fleet, and his son really did annex Ukrainian Crimea."
Putin himself has mentioned this page from his father's biography more than once. In his article published on the eve of May 9, 2015, he openly wrote for the first time about Spiridonovich's service in Sevastopol, timing these recollections to coincide with the anniversary of the annexation of the peninsula.
You know what I'm curious about? How many more such family scenarios are behind the current bloody policies of the Kremlin? It seems that Russia is preparing for yet another war. Putin's loyal ally Patrushev accused Japan of preparing new territorial claims against Russia. Japan does not intend to stop at the Kuril Islands and is hatching plans to annex other Russian territories. This was stated by the assistant to the president of the Russian Federation, chairman of the Maritime Board, Nikolai Patrushev. We will tell you all the details in our report.
Russia is preparing for yet another war. The dispute over the Kuril Islands is gaining momentum.
This is a particularly complex and intricate issue, presenting numerous challenges and requiring careful consideration.
Moscow has stated that Japan is planning to put forward new territorial claims against Russia. According to Putin's aide Nikolai Patrushev, this poses a direct threat to the national security of the Russian Federation. From his point of view, Tokyo's policy, which seeks the return of the islands, is driven by commercial interests.
Today, the Japanese need an injustice regarding the so-called Northern Territories, both for their mineral and biological resources. The deep waters around the Kuril Islands have unique hydrography.
Russia is a vassal of China. China and Japan are indeed significant strategic adversaries. Therefore, any notable outburst from Patrushev or from Putin himself, or indeed from any prominent member of the Russian ruling elite, is to be considered a particular kind of gesture and a very clear message emanating from Moscow directly towards its senior and highly important partner, Beijing. So it's probably not worth being surprised by this statement. But overall, it should also be understood that Russia is aggressively disposed toward any representative of the Western Bloc.
Patrushev also emphasized that Russia will not sit idly by in the face of Tokyo's policy of militarization and will increase its defensive capabilities in the Far East.
Russia always uses the claim that someone allegedly wants to attack it as a pretext for aggression, and this has always been the case without exception. And the most recent wars that Russia started also began in roughly the same way. In other words, according to the core of their ideology, Russia never attacks first. It always claims to be repelling someone else's attack. Therefore, from the comprehensive perspective of Russian official statements and their diplomatic communications, the act of accusing another entity or nation of allegedly harboring intentions to attack Russia is invariably presented as the crucial, initial, and foundational stage in the systematic process of launching an act of aggression against that very entity or nation.
First and foremost, it is the desire to appear to be something rather than actually being it. At the present moment, Russia does not have enough resources to wage a full-scale war with Ukraine and simultaneously prepare for a potential invasion of the Baltic countries, and at the same time to build up military resources in the Far East. This is more of a statement of intent. And again, the message to China is that in the context of confrontation with Chinese adversaries, Russia is ready to be a major ally and a junior partner in any initiative from Beijing.
And once again, the Russian dictator's aide stated that Russia rightfully owns the islands and that there is nothing to discuss here.
As far as I understand, I believe that this is their territory and Russia controls these territories, but at the same time, Japan does not recognize this legally.
The point is that for more than 70 years, the countries have been unable to sign a peace treaty due to the territorial dispute over the Kuril Islands. Tokyo names the return of the islands as the main condition for concluding such a treaty. But the Kremlin believes that the southern Kurils became part of the USSR as a result of World War II and sovereignty.
The existing Kuril Islands, including some islands that Japan calls the Northern Territories, are considered by some to not be directly related to the Kuril Islands themselves. They were occupied by the USSR, but this was not legally finalized in the form of a specific treaty. And now the prospects for this treaty are looking more and more doubtful. Back in Yeltsin's time, there was a draft of such a treaty that would have settled all issues, including territorial ones. There was an interesting proposal in which Russia would return 2 small islands to Japan. In return, Japan would recognize Russia's control over the 2 remaining, somewhat larger islands. And in this way, a certain diplomatic solution was found. But at that time, it all fell through.
The Russian dictator and the former Prime Minister of Japan met 25 times in an attempt to reach an agreement on the islands, but without success. And after the constitution was amended, the transfer of any part of Russian territory was made illegal.
In Russia, the law and the constitution are not considered absolutely inviolable norms. Putin himself was elected for only 2 terms according to the constitution, yet he remains in power to this day. and the Russian constitution has been fundamentally and repeatedly changed so many times throughout its recent history that I think the very essence of the underlying problem here is not primarily in the constitutional document itself, but rather, and more profoundly, in Vladimir Putin's deeply personal and deeply ingrained desire to overtly demonstrate his perceived imperial grandeur and historical significance. But Putin is not eternal, and Russian imperialism is not eternal either.
In March 2023, Russia broke off peace treaty negotiations with Japan, which had supported Western sanctions after the invasion of Ukraine.
Clearly something has died in the swampy forest. In Voronezh, young people took to the streets to protest against the blocking of messengers. Hey, people of Voronezh, do you all feel immortal now to be speaking out so openly against your leader?
Personally, I want to say that I am against bans on Discord, for example. Against bans on YouTube, against bans on Telegram, on WhatsApp. We, the people, we are the power here. Isn't that true?
I'm not some dissident. There are many of us, hundreds, thousands. And if there are many of us, we can achieve what we want. But
meanwhile, the grown-up, tradition-bound officials are frantically searching for alternatives to Telegram and WhatsApp. Let me remind you, in mid-August, the Russian authorities blocked calls on the most popular messengers, WhatsApp and Telegram. At the same time, they launched an unprecedented campaign to promote the so-called national messenger, the Max messenger. Residents of Russia are being pressured with ads, persuasion, and threats to switch to this service. But why are even Russian officials afraid of Max? We covered this in our report.
The digital chaos continues in Russia. This summer, the authorities began restricting calls on Telegram and WhatsApp. For millions of users, this came as a shock. The usual messengers started glitching and calls just kept dropping. Advertising for the domestic meme toilets, internal. At the same time, officials were required to switch to the new state messenger, Max. The presidential administration directly demanded that all official channels be moved there. Telegram remains, but only as a secondary option. Regional authorities went even further. In St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, Kuzbas, and Tatarstan, school chats and work correspondence have already been moved to Max. The deadlines are strict. The transition must be completed by the end of the quarter.
Are passers-by downloading it?
From September 1st, this messenger also became mandatory. Now it will be pre-installed on all new smartphones and tablets in Russia. The law has already been signed by Vladimir Putin.
Electronic stores are required to install this app on all smartphones, meaning you simply won't be able to buy a phone without Max. Everything on your phone, basically your whole life, will end up in a building on M-Contrast. Thanks to the national messenger, Pakistan Messenger.
Officially, Max is advertised as a convenient and more secure app. But experts warn that this is not just a messenger, but a tool for total surveillance. User data is stored on government servers. The app requests access to the camera, microphone, geolocation, and files. Moreover, researchers have found evidence that Max may remain in the system even after being deleted.
This is Sergei Boyarsky, a State Duma deputy from United Russia. He has become the main promoter of the national messenger. This is what his Telegram channel feed looks like today. Almost every third post is about Max. In one of them, the deputy admits that Max leaks user data to law enforcement agencies. By the way, this is also stated in the messenger's user agreement.
Ordinary users feel it, and officials aren't eager to switch either, but they're left with almost no choice. Telegram and WhatsApp are being strangled by restrictions, while Max is being pushed through advertising, orders, and fear.
Now they have to arrange calls in advance and then turn on a VPN to talk on Telegram or WhatsApp. Here is his quote. Free VPNs are slow, paid ones are fast, no problem. The conversations still stay in Telegram and WhatsApp. You send a message, give a heads up, make a call. You have to warn people because the VPN isn't always on. And when it is, some apps, Russian websites, and parking payments don't work. There's another inconvenience, it's not always on. The authorities
dream of repeating the Chinese experience, creating a super app through which calls, payments, government services, and even a digital passport would all go. It's more of a trap. A digital pen where every message, every call, every action will end up under state control.
With this messenger, you will never feel lonely. And I know that I'm always being listened to and they always know where I am.
In conclusion, The whole country, from ordinary citizens to officials, has found itself facing a choice. People got used to Telegram and WhatsApp, but they are being squeezed out by the system. Max is pushing methodical advertising and pressure. But what comes next?
A new trend is literally rushing in with a screech. Videos generated by artificial intelligence have become hugely popular among the families of the 200s boys from the special military operation. So first there are hugs and then a straight road ahead. No, not to hell. Russians send their rapists, murderers, and looters up the staircase to heaven. And these rather primitive little videos start at 1,500 rubles and go up from there. But the main thing is there's a line for these orders to the mausoleum. Just like in our news, let us know what we should change to become the best and we'll definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do and be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon.